Hello everybody and welcome to this week's Motor Trade Radio podcast, brought to you in association with eBay Motors Group. It is Saturday the 12th of June and you're joined by myself, Philip Nothard.
And me, Curtis Hutchinson. So this is episode 32, season 7 of Motor Trade Radio, bringing you all the chatter that matters. And once again, we've gathered together this week's big car retailing stories across the franchised and independent sectors for you to enjoy all in one place, on demand, on your podcast feed.
So, I mean, some great headlines coming up this week, Curtis, but next week we're going to be rejoined by Stephen Whitten. From MBO, yes. With yet another little snippet of insight and thoughts around that mental health that seemed to go down quite well on the last episode he was on last week. So we'll keep that going forward and continued. Some fantastic headlines this week. But we've had a busy week again, haven't we?
We have indeed, yes, and some good feedback on social media from Steve's slot last week, his MBO moment. So look forward to seeing what he's talking about next week, because last week it was all about furlough, wasn't it? Staff coming off furlough and the implications for that. But otherwise we've got some good headlines this week. And just as a reminder, thanks for all your press releases and messages. If you'd like to come on the show or have any news or press releases to share, then just message Phil or myself on LinkedIn or Twitter, or email us at motortraderadio@yahoo.com.
So what have we got in the headlines this week then, Curtis? We've got another top 10 coming, which is a little cracker at the end there, but some other stories this week on EV.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. So this week, Cambria's Mark Lavery targets growth after reaching MBO agreement. Dealers see rise in return on sales in April, but a fall in turnover shows agency sales taking an effect. Devonshire Motors refranchises with Hyundai and Isuzu ahead of that Mitsubishi UK exit at the end of the year. And the second half, as you mentioned, is themed around electric. So is the used EV revolution now underway? Glasses thinks it is, so we'll find out why. The UK's electric car motorway charging network has been acquired by GridServe, and that's actually quite an interesting strategic move. Thefts of electric car charging cables could be the next crime wave to sweep Britain's streets. And finally, as you alluded to, we do have a top 10, and it's all about how some ordinary and rather underwhelming everyday cars from the 60s and 70s are actually rising in value faster than desirable classics.
And they're not Matchbox this week, are they?
No, they're real cars.
Fantastic story last week on those Matchboxes, and if you've not listened to it or seen the story on that Matchbox collection that gentleman had and what it's been valued at, then I do urge you to pick up on that podcast and go and check that headline out. So we better get on with this week then, Curtis. So as you say there with Cambria, we've been talking as this has sort of been evolving, and unfortunately we haven't got an answer yet, but it's from AM Online, and Cambria CEO Mark Lavery targets growth after reaching MBO agreement. So this is the next move now, isn't it? So he is now talking about that they is valuing the business at 80 pence per share. We've had the moves with Mullins and Duckers in terms of them becoming more impartial, and this is where Mark has taken it on himself, but it hasn't gone through yet from the headlines here.
No, it's a work in progress, and we've covered this story a couple of times already, and we will return to it because there will be further updates. But this story is all based around a statement that was issued via the stock exchange on Thursday during the week, and the group revealed it would be returning to private ownership pending approval from shareholders at a meeting, and also a positive vote in an upcoming general meeting. So there is a proviso there, so we need to see what the shareholders think. But as you say, it's based around 80 pence per share. and the valuation represents a premium of approximately 21%, according to the AM report, on the closing share price of 66p a share, which was on the 19th of March, which was effectively the last business day prior to the commencement of this offer. And the story does actually mention that Mark Lavery has actually put his bid through under a newly formed limited company called Bidco.
Yeah, and they do cite that the bid for the business has been approved by an independent committee of the board of directors of Cambria, advised by Rothschild and Co., which is where this kind of the next stage of the story has come from, isn't it? That it has had that committee approval. So they do talk further on down the story about is it a court date or something that this needs to go
Yes,
through?
it's a court meeting, which is a term I'm not familiar with, but we'll have to see what happens and report on that. And there's some interesting comments from Mark in the story, because he says that, I am mindful of a rapid period of change for the industry and that there may be headwinds ahead. But I look forward to capitalizing on the growth opportunities ahead and creating value for customers, employers, and brand partners under private ownership. So, there's a real clear statement of intent there from Mark.
Yeah. I mean, there has been muted some negativity towards this from some of the shareholders, I believe, across the sector. And it's probably more on the back that they felt that how strong the business was from a shareholder investment perspective. Those that have got shares in the business certainly saw the value in the business, the speed of growth, and the strength of the management team that Mark has set up there. And rightly so, probably disappointed that it's been taken off the market, which therefore will remove their opportunities for commercial returns on their investment, won't it? So you can see why there would be some disappointment, I suspect, from those shareholders in the business. But also you look at it from Mark's perspective, that he feels he can take it to the next level in private ownership through his business. So you can kind of get that view from both sides on this. So again, it does look like it's going to go through from that statement within the report there, but we will try and keep you up to date, and hopefully we will get Mark back on the show, because people do talk about that interview that we had with Mark
Yes.
to this day.
Yep.
Because it is a fantastic interview with Mark. So if you are listening, Mark, today, then please do shout out and come back on, and we'll get you back on once this has gone through and get your view on it.
Yeah, definitely. So next headline is from Car Dealer, and the headline is "Dealers see return on sales rise in April, but fall in turnover shows agency sales taking an effect." So return on sales, so this is in the rolling 12 months to April, was 1.35%, which is an encouraging figure because it has been tracking a lot lower than that, really, not just over the last 12 months, but over the last few years. It's been around that 1% level, hasn't it?
It has, and they do put this down to, like you say, there's this mute towards the agency model, but also, we've been talking about supply and demand constraints over recent weeks, particularly in that used car market, and they do highlight there within the report that used car return on investment rose to 89.6%, as by an increase in overall average profit per unit, with stock turn lengthening to 63.6 days as stock shortages start to hit the sector. So again, showing that shortage of stock is causing this increase in profit margin and therefore return on sales for the sector at the minute.
Yeah, and it's worth pointing out that turnover was down by 10% in April. And there's an interesting comment here from ASC, and they say that the reason for this decline is mainly down to the COVID lockdowns. But it goes on to say, however, it also shows the early signs of the growth of the agency model. The fact that retailer profitability has grown during this period of reduced sales shows a potential path to retailer profitability in the agency future, which really touches touches on a point that we were discussing probably a couple of episodes ago about, if the agency model does come in, then the profit opportunities are still there, but they need to come from somewhere else, because we're not going to be seeing the big turnover figures from new car sales.
No, and that was something that Steve Young pointed out, wasn't it, from ICDP on that interview we did with Steve. And we have got a story probably for next week that we'll maybe deep dive again into some updates on agency model and get some views from others across the sector on that one. So keep tuned for that one. But agency model is certainly now being talked about a lot more than it has been previously. So I'm sure you can see why with that one.
Yeah, and also if you want to hear more about the agency model, just check out the recent interview we did with Dash Gupta, because he had a lot to say about agency and mostly around the advantages of agency. So well worth checking out. So next headline is from AM Online, and it's Devonshire Motors completes double with Hyundai and Isuzu franchise editions. So this is Devonshire Motors, who's run by Nathan Tomlinson, who's a friend of the podcast. He's been on a couple of times, and I know he listens on a regular basis. So really good story this, because Devonshire Motors represents Mitsubishi. It's they're based in Barnstaple in Devon, and that is the sole franchise. So like many Mitsubishi dealers, they were faced with, well, what do we need to do to re-franchise, because Mitsubishi is pulling out of the new car sales business in the UK by the end of the year. So they've partnered with Hyundai and Isuzu, which gives them really, really good coverage, because Isuzu, obviously that strength in pickups that Mitsubishi had, especially for that client base down in Devon, and Hyundai because of the electric future. So, in the story, Nathan does say that he hopes this will future-proof the business, and I think it will.
No, you're right with that, and they say, Nathan's been on the podcast, and he's certainly a supporter of the podcast, and I know he has said that he'll come back on at some point, but obviously you can see why he's been a little bit busy through this. I mean, what a perfect fit for that business. So that Isuzu, through the IM ownership, supporting that demand that he would have had with his Mitsubishi customers within that sector, but actually then he's moving into that world of EV as well, with Hyundai, which is a great sort of future proofing his business. But he does point out that the last 12 months has been a real test as a team. If they've worked through the challenges of COVID-19 while reinventing the entire business at the same time, following obviously the end of Devonshire Motors' 30-year sales franchise relationship with Mitsubishi. So not only as you point out that he's been tackling the challenges of COVID and the click and collect and everything there, whilst he's had the exit of a brand. Yeah. He's also been on with trying to look at replacement brands, and I think Hyundai comes on from August of this year, I think it's cited.
Yes, you're right, with Isuzu following in. Oh no! While Isuzu retail operations got underway in April, so he's gone live with Isuzu, and Isuzu is notable not only because of the pickups, but because it is distributed by IM Group, who we reported a couple of weeks ago are likely to be taking over that after-sales business from Mitsubishi when they exit the UK.
No, and again, maybe we'll try and get Nathan back on and talk through what some of the challenges that he probably had trying to get this in place. And as you say there, Curtis, moving very quickly there with Isuzu, and not long now before he gets Hyundai in there. So from where he would have been 12 months ago, what a significant change for him, and you can see why he's got such a strong reputation within the sector. So well done with that one, Nathan, to you and the team down there, and open door to come back on the podcast and talk through some of the risks, the challenges and opportunities you see with this new venture you're now taking.
You're listening to All the Chat That Matters on Motor Trade Radio, brought to you in association with eBay Motors Group. This is your weekly one-stop shop for the latest car retailing headlines, and available on demand wherever you are on your podcast feed.
So we're heading over to our friends at Motoring Research now with Richard Ocott there, that has done on the area of EV. So used EV revolution now underway. And this is from insight coming out from Glasses, with Jonathan Brown there at Glasses Guide, that are saying that obviously getting some stability now within that used marketplace for EVs, beginning to see EVs as an affordable option compared to traditional cars. So what are your thoughts on this one? Because it is still a fairly small sample base, isn't it?
It is, yeah, and this story is based around research that Glasses did on the number of EVs in the used car market. And 15 months ago, they found 1,500 for sale. And more recently, when they've researched it, that's grown by 130% to 7,500 battery electric vehicles, so pure EVs. So still small figures, but obviously a large increase there from that low base. And it does follow on from conversations we've certainly had on the podcast about EV residual values, because they have been very, very high, and to the point where maybe a lot of models out there just aren't attractive for used car buyers because of that price. But the Glasses research has found that the sweet spot for used car buyers for EVs is around, well, just under £6,000, 5,995, which really covers those first and second generation Nissan Leafs and things like the Zoe. In fact, Nissan Leaf, 10-year-old Nissan Leaf, is priced at around £4,000, so it does fall into that.
Yeah, in that interview we did with Alan from JA Autos, didn't we? That time we were talking about that demand for that low end, that price, affordable entry sort of used EV, and I think it was a Nissan Leaf that he said he had, isn't it, that they generated all that demand at the time. So you can see where this is starting to come from, and I think, as you say there, not just the RV price, but the instability of that RV, that flux that it happens there. I mean, I'd have a Tesla at 5,995, wouldn't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, wouldn't have a problem with that at all.
No, but I think it is positive, and I think the point that Glasses say at the end there with Jonathan is that this is about the increase in new EV sales, and you talk about it a lot on your webinars around that used marketplace, isn't it? That
yes,
you've got to get that used marketplace strong enough that as it's being pushed into the new market, that there is a remarketing, there is a used marketplace for these vehicles as they come out at the back end, and certainly signs look like it is starting to improve. So hopefully that will come and start to improve at the same rate as we are seeing in the new car market, as we discussed on the other week's podcast on the May results. Sorry.
Yeah, and the next headline is over at the Financial Times, and it's UK electric car motorway charging network sold to Hitachi Venture. So the Hitachi Venture is GridServe. So the company that operates Britain's electric vehicle motorway charging network is being bought by GridServe, and they already had a 25% stake. So that this is a matter of acquiring the rest. So they've had that stake since March, and this is, as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, this is particularly significant because GridServe, they've really carved out a growing niche. I mean, it's probably not even a niche anymore. And we covered about them opening this dedicated electric forecourt in Braintree, Essex, which was at the tail end of last year, and with the plan to roll out 100 dedicated EV charging stations. But one of the big criticisms, you mentioned the EV forums that I host on a monthly basis. One of the big criticisms that I'm hearing is company car drivers going into motorway service stations and not being able to recharge because one of the charging points is out of order, and that there has been an issue around the maintenance of charging points, especially on motorway service stations. So hopefully with GridServe coming in and acquiring this network, they will be in a position to invest in upgrading those facilities and maintaining them.
I mean, yeah, and there's even a point in here, there's a quick comment there that it takes, the network needs tens of millions of pounds spending on it to bring it up to the current standard. So, electric car take-up has been beyond our wildest dreams. They're talking about when they started 10 years ago. But obviously now with the ecotricity wants to get out there with things we feel that they don't need to be in anymore, and wants to get into things that are really cutting edge. So you can see this investment needed, doesn't it? I mean, when you're highlighting that tens of millions to bring it up to current standard, and we know, and as as the other webinars that you've been on and hosting there, that it's evolving very quickly, this sector, isn't it? So if we are tens of millions behind just to current standards, the speed in which this is evolving, they're going to be way behind if we don't get it up to standard now.
Yeah, and it is an interesting dilemma, because we think of electric being new, but it's not. We're already seeing legacy issues, and especially with those early generation charging points. So this potentially is significant news for the sector.
And heading off to the next story now. So this is money. Of which the headline tells you the story. So thefts of electric car charging cables could be the next crime wave to sweep Britain's streets in the wake of catalytic converter raiders. So this is around this one. They're talking about the fact that the cables contain copper. So the AA is saying that that may be part of the reason for this taking place, this crime taking place, of the value of copper. But secondly, the cost of replacing or obtaining charging cables for many of the manufacturers is costly in some cases. So that actually this is getting under that demand for that aftermarket of replacement or cables that they don't want to buy from the manufacturer themselves.
Yeah, it's a really interesting supply and demand story, this one, isn't it?
Yes.
So the report in This Is Money does say that some cars are being sold without cables. They are an extra, and some of those customers are choosing to buy cables online. Now, thieves have spotted a potential here by stealing cables and selling them online or to scrap merchants. They are worth around £200 a cord. So, these are valuable items. And certainly in the older generation EVs, and we were just talking about legacy issues with EVs, they are easy to remove because it was only more recent models where if you lock the car, it locks the cable, but on older versions you can't do that. So they are targets, pretty soft targets as well.
Yeah, and I think back in my days within the dealership, the amount of times that you sent vehicles into the wholesale market where the car had been in the valeting bay or whatever, and parcel shelves have been removed or spare wheels have been removed or whatever that is, and then the vehicle goes into the wholesale market, and where's the spare key, where's the spare wheel, where's the parcel shelf? Well, you do get that now already with where's the charging cable, and it's a significantly higher cost to replace it at the minute. So you do wonder how many of these charging cables are still on the dealership's forecourt, valeting bays, or in cupboards there, or at people's houses, etc., etc. But they do say, there's a comment in here from divert.co.uk that is one that EV owners should not leave an electric charging cable outside their home, as they become the new target of scrap metal thieves on the hunt for copper. So again, I suppose it does happen, doesn't it, that the cable's just left on the driveway ready for that vehicle when it returns home, plug it straight in, and easy done. But it's a target for theft now.
Yeah, most definitely. And we're going to stay with This Is Money even for this week's. And finally, the headline here is Unlikely Classics. Ordinary cars that have dwindled to such low numbers they've become cherished collector's items. items soaring in value. So it's quite a funny story, this one, because it does actually say some ordinary and frankly underwhelming everyday cars from the past are rising in value faster than desirable classics like the E-Type Jag. So this is really focusing on models like the Ford Cortina, the Renault 4, which I'll point out at this stage, I learnt to drive in a Renault 4, so
I was going to ask you the question on all this. Yeah.
I will not have a bad word said about Renault 4s. Hillman Imps, Austin Princesses, and the infamous Allegro, which I understand you had an Allegro once.
I was going to ask you this question of how many of these have you owned or at least driven, give an indication of our age here. But yeah, when I did enter the car industry at my youthful age of 17, I didn't have one as a demo. It was actually, oddly, that I bought one to sell and made money. I can't remember how much I paid for it and how much I made on it. It was beige, I remember that, with a brown interior. I don't think they did any other, did they, in an Allegro?
Any colour you like, as long as
it's beige. Yeah. So, but yeah, I think you commented earlier on that if I still owned it, I'd have made more money. Not so sure about that. Depends how much I paid for it.
Well, we'll find out in a minute just how much you would have made. But the reason behind this is that the number of these cars is actually dwindling, and there are nostalgic car enthusiasts who are sort of trying to track down the next desirable model, and they are paying good money for these cars because of this rarity value. And this has all been put together by Haggerty, the UK classic car insurer, who have been tracking a rise in values for a lot of these models.
Yeah, I have actually owned more than that. Actually, just looking at your list there, Curtis, I had an Alpha 33 as a demo as well in my my career, and I would have loved to have owned that still today, but I'm sure the body wouldn't have kept up with the performance of the engine. But so do you want to go through these top 10 then, because there's some crackers in here?
There are, yeah. So number 10, Alfa Romeo 33, which is vintage 1987 to 94. So that's actually gone up 4.4%. Number 9, the Austin Princess, that's from mid-70s to 81. That's gone up 5.1%. And number 8, Peugeot 203 from 1948 1960.
That is before our time, that one, isn't it, Curtis?
It's worth pointing that out. Both dates are before our time. That's up 5.2%. Number 7, we've got the Renault 16. So it's amazing how long these cars were around for, because that spanned 1968 to 1979. That's gone up 7.4%. Number 6, the Ford Cortina Mark III, 1970 to 76. That's gone up 7.8%. And so we're into the top 5, if I keep scrolling down. Number 5, the Hillman Imp, 1963 to 76. That's gone up 10.1%. And it's worth pointing out, if you do head over to this story, there's some wonderful pictures of these cars. So the Hillman Imp, we see Prince Philip climbing into what looks like a brand new model that's just come off the production line. Number 4, Renault 4, good old Renault 4, 1962 to 1980. That's gone up 10.6%. That is in orange.
Yes.
Number 3, your Austin Allegro in beige. That ran from 73 to 82%. From 1973 to 1982. I'm getting excited by all these numbers, Phil. That's gone up 13.6%. And this is where the numbers really start to shoot up, because number 2, we've got the Ford Cortina Mark II, which ran from 62 to 66. That's gone up 19.4%. And at number 1, we've got the Triumph 1300, which ran from 65 to 70, and that's gone up a whopping 20.4%. Now, I've got to qualify that whopping, because the average value in 2020 was 3,375, and the average value now is £4,063. So that's a gain of £688.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to get through there, and we didn't get into the realms of the Vauxhall Cavalier and the Ford Sierra and the Austin Mini Metro that's in there and things like that. So it's the plenty of models, makes and models there that many of our listeners will recognise in probably their career within the industry, I suspect, in some cases, and some that were, as you said there, Curtis, probably a little bit before our time with the Wolseley 1300 and the Wolseley 1100 there, that probably a little bit before our time in the main. But yeah, head over to that story, because as you say, Curtis, some beautiful pictures there of some of those cars, and I think looking at that Ford Cortina Mark II, that's still you'd get away with that looking on it. That's a pretty nice car, that one on that picture there. So we'll have a look at that one. But I wonder how much of this has been down to COVID as well. So
yes, with accidental savers, and it's worth pointing out that we there's some huge rises there. But if you had a Jaguar E-Type Series 3, that would have gone up 8.2% over the same period, and that's currently trading at £59,500.
Slightly different in value there, yes.
It is, yeah.
Definitely. But great story, and so head over to that story if you can on This Is Money, and have a look through that. So do a bit of little reminiscing there on some of those not so pretty vehicles that have actually found themselves going up in value. So that's it for this week. We've got hopefully some good interviews coming up over the next couple of weeks, so keep your ear out for those. As you said at the start there, Steve Whitton will be back on next week from Menable, sharing some extra is it Menable moments? I think we the Menable.
Menable moments.
Yeah. So
Menable moments. Yes.
That's it. So we'll have Steve back on next week for that, and keep tuned. Plenty of lots of headlines and lots of stories. We'll try and deliver you again next week.
So that's all for now. You've been listening to the weekly Motor Trade Radio podcast, brought to you in association with eBay Motors Group. Thanks for joining us for all the chatter that matters. We're back next weekend with our take on the latest car retailing headlines from across the media. Until then, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.